I think the main reason for this is because, on the contrary, it's not Christian democracy anymore. The mainstream Christian Democrat parties, in trying to appease to everyone, they've lost their core voter base. One of the biggest misconceptions is that we Christian conservatives are the only ones in the political sphere who wish to impose our values.
All right, we're gonna talk today, I guess, about Christian politics, something that is not as popular anymore as maybe a few decades ago.
For sure.
How do you look at the fact? Let's start before we go into your organization. How do you look at, especially the Christian adjacent politics, like the Christian Democrats? They've also across Europe, they're kind of losing power. Why do you think Christian politics is not really persuasive anymore? Maybe in a broader sense, conservative politics seems to kind of lost a lot of merit for a lot of people.
You're right. So Christian democracy was really popular after the Second World War. But I would say 20 years ago, if not earlier, it really started to slowly decline. And I think the main reason for this is because, on the contrary, it's not Christian democracy anymore. Most Christian democratic parties have become way too diluted, to the point that they have isolated their voters and they resemble very little with Christian democracy. And this is the case not only at the EU level with the former Christian Democrats who then rebranded to the EPP, but it's also the case on the national level. And because of this, it created a vacuum where people started voting for often more fringe, populist, anti-mainstream type of parties. Because they felt like their interests and views were more represented by them. Whereas the mainstream Christian Democrat parties, in trying to appease to everyone, they've lost their core voter base. So I think we are the antidote to that, because the ECPP, so the European Christian Political Party, initially it started as a movement in the European Parliament. Because many Christian MEPs felt isolated and they felt like they didn't belong in any political group or party. So that's how the movement started. It gathered all of these Christian MEPs before it even became a party. And this happened 20 years ago, right as the Christian Democrats, the EPP, were becoming more and more diluted. ECPP saw a vacuum to go in and form a movement that is actually based on Christian democratic values, Christian social thinking, and many of those values, of course, are conservative when it comes to the family life and all of those things, and medical ethics, of course. But when it comes to other matters such as migration, environment, and so on, and the economy, I think we accommodate a wide spectrum across our MEPs, because some of our MEPs are more towards the right, or they're part of ECR, and then other MEPs of ours are in the EPP. So there's a wide spectrum in that regard, but what unites them is their joint Christian vision for society, which is often rooted in relational thinking, the school of distributism, Catholic social teaching, the sacred scriptures, and so on.
And of course, you are the vice president of the youth movement. Maybe you can also tell a bit, introduce yourself to our viewers of what you do and actually what this youth movement also does.
Yes. So my name is Victoria Meller, and I'm the vice president of the ECP Youth, which is the European Christian Political Youth. So we are the youth wing of the ECPT. So we are the youth wing of the only explicitly Christian political party in the European Parliament. So our role is basically to empower young Christians through our aspiring politicians, or even aspiring journalists, aspiring political commentators, activists, through a series of training programs we do. So one of those is the Christian Changemakers program, which really delves into the theoretical, practical, and spiritual sides of becoming an effective leader and an effective politician. So we teach debating, how to be interviewed by a very hostile journalist, how to debate your opponents, how to, persuade someone on the other side, how to behave in a press conference. So we we hire for these trainings the greatest policy experts, journalists, people in media, people in politics to train the youth. It's so that they are equipped for this, because nowadays it's very hard for Christian conservatives who have certain convictions to go into the political sphere, and then they have a bunch of media outlets that are already very hostile towards them. And when they're faced with the difficult questions, they don't know how to react. They don't know how to defend their pro-life stance, for example, to someone that's more liberal or more leftist. So we teach them a series of tactics and strategies in order to be able to defend our viewpoints in an effective manner, especially to, persuade our opponents, or to not make fools of ourselves when you're faced in that hostile situation. And so, so the theoretical side, practical and spiritual. And the spiritual side is also very important because ultimately we want young politicians that have integrity and that actually want to serve the common good and not just, have power.
Okay, I have a few questions there. Let's start. I think one of the things that the Christian Democrats did was that they said, okay, we have Christian values, but it's not only for Christians, especially in the secular time. If I look at my own home country, the Netherlands, there are almost no Christians that are in the political landscape.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think at the moment we have 5 MPs out of 150 that are from an actually Christian party in the Netherlands. So how would you say that this is relevant to a Europe that's become more secularized? And maybe is there a way also to have this Christian politics that's relevant for conservative, more secular people?
Yes. So I think I actually always disagree with the fact that Christian values are not relevant to a secular society, because even though, much of our, especially in Western Europe, much of our societies are very secularized and very post-Christian, post-modernist. Even though they think they're explicitly rejecting religion, they're actually not. They're actually still living on the skeletons of our Christian heritage. And I think that a lot of the values that come from Christianity, such as human dignity, believing in the equality of all human beings, the way we see women's role in society, all of those, or how we treat ethnic minorities, even sexual minorities, those are very deeply Christian assumptions we hold. And when we look at how it was in pre-Christian times, or even in other cultures, they don't have those values. They don't believe in equality, and they don't believe in gender equality or any of those things. So I think even in our secular society, even though we may see some movements as leftist or liberal, even those liberal movements are still based on deeply Christian assumptions. So in that way, I think Christian values are still very much relevant. And
my point was more that let's say you have Christian politics, and you call it Christian politics, it's not going to really speak to non-Christian people. I'm not saying that there's no influence of Christianity, of course, over the centuries, of course, that shapes also the way people think.
yes,
But the more, the Christian Democratic point was, okay, we're going to have those Christian heritage. We're going to try to make it as approachable to also Christians and non-Christians alike. That's more of the point, where you can also make it approachable. Is that also what you guys are going for? Or is it...
Yes, I think so. And I mean, like, even at some events in the past, we've had people who are not believers or who are on the left, and they still found some commonality with us on certain issues or in how we approach those issues. So I think when it comes to especially the relational thinking school, which guides a lot of our policy proposals, so how we view the relational approach to economics and environmental issues or migration, those principles can still be applied by a secular person, even though to us they have a deeply Christian underpinning. That doesn't mean that they cannot be applied in a secular society and by people who have no Christian faith or no Christian cultural consciousness.
It's interesting because a lot of the things you were saying about things that are deeply Christian automatically associate them nowadays a lot with, you could say, left-wing policies, right?
Yes.
Not so much with conservative policies.
Yes.
So how do you explain that the left has taken a lot of these issues, you could say, and more the right-wing and conservative have to kind of taken a different approach? How does it fit within the Christian political narrative for you?
Yes, I mean, I think like even the movements like Black Lives Matter or like radical feminism, even though I don't personally agree with those movements, and I think they make the wrong conclusions and they use the wrong tactics. I think the ideas they have at the core of them still derive from those Christian doctrine of Imago Dei, that, each person has inviolable human dignity, which is also Article 1 of the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, or the right to life, even though we're now living in a world where there's assisted dying, euthanasia and abortion. People still have some semblance of the right to life, and that's a uniquely Christian perspective, because when you look at other cultures or other or pre-Christian times, they did not have those same conceptions. So I think like very much so, even though I disagree with most of the leftist policy proposals, I think many of their ideas, even with migration, in wanting to import on a mass level migrants, they're still operating on those Christian assumptions of loving thy neighbor and welcoming the refugee, even though the way they wish to do it and how they go about it, I don't agree with. That core value there is still deep Christian. So I think we can definitely build a lot of bridges with both the secular right or secular conservatives and the secular left, because we still have many common values.
And what do you think about the fact that a lot on the conservative right, especially more the popular side of it, has become more explicit in relating its views to Christianity? For example, a good example is like, we need to keep Christianity in Europe, so we are against immigration. Just as an example, right?
Yes.
What do you think about the fact that it's become more almost like an explicit point of like identity for a lot of the right in Europe nowadays, more than for the other conservatives in the center, for example?
Yes. I mean, I have mixed views about it. A part of me is obviously happy to see Christian values be talked more in the public sphere, but at the same time, I think a lot of it is performative. And
in which sense do you think it's performative?
I mean, for example, so last year at ARC, I remember there was a speaker and someone asked him in the audience, like, oh, so how do you think we should protect the family and promote marriage and all these things? And he said, oh, well, I've been divorced 3 times and I'm not the best person to ask. And the room kind of fell silent for a few minutes because we didn't know what to say. So I think there's a lot of politicians who use conservative values and Christian values in order to, get elected or further their political agenda. But in their private lives, they don't live much differently to the liberal politicians. So I think it's a very bad PR for true Christian conservatives and for true Christian conservative politicians when people use Christianity as a political bargaining tool, because people hate hypocrisy, and it almost turns them off more from Christian conservatism when they see this hypocrisy in the political sphere. So when it's performative, I really despise it. But if it's genuine, then I have no problem in conservative politicians.
And do you think there's some merit to the fact that they feel, or at least they say, no matter if it's performative or not, that you could say the broader European and Christian civilization is under threat in Europe.
Yes, in that regard, yes. And I think especially the issue of mass migration, it made a lot of Europeans wake up to the fact that, oh, actually, maybe not every culture and every civilization is the same as us and has the same norms and values as us. And it's made them suddenly, realize that there is some value in the Christian heritage we have, and in the values it has bestowed upon our society. So in that sense, it has been a positive. But like a certain German politician said, it just be like, in order to safeguard Christianity in our societies, it's not enough to get the migrants out or the Muslim migrants out, but the solution is to actually, for us Europeans, to actually start going to church again and start actually living our Christian values. So I think it's a starting point where it's good that people are realizing that there's richness in our Christian heritage, but it's not enough to realize it. But we must actually act upon it.
Great. And the last question I would have is, what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about Christian conservative politics for other non-conservative people, especially more on the left?
So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that we Christian conservatives are the only ones in the political sphere who wish to impose our values, especially our religious values, on other people. And I think that's just ridiculous, because there is no such thing as a neutral philosophy or a neutral worldview. Everyone, whether secular, leftist, liberal, conservative, Christian, Muslim, each person has a set of values, a certain moral framework, a certain set of norms that they view the world through, and that they use to base their policy on, if they're politicians or if they're a political party. So I think it's unfair and untrue to only accuse Christian conservatives of doing so, when really every political party, every politician does this regardless of ideology. There is no such thing as a neutral politician, and the ones that are neutral are usually just chameleons who kind of shift and adjust depending on where they see the electoral winds go.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.